So I have the same ruler that I got in 1979.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I still use it. It was I don't know, it was this strange gift from it was actually from my aunt. She sent us these. It's a little metric ruler, like because I don't know if you remember this far back, but like the country was in
Yeah,
3 years
yeah.
the whole country is going to be metric. So
Yeah.
she bought us, like me and my sister, she bought us these really nice metal metric rulers, and because it's metal, it's really I can get straight lines really easily with it. So I've always used it, and it's got the date on it. So I look at it and I laugh because like 1979, I've been using the same ruler.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 19. My guest for this episode is Andrew Boysen. Before we begin, I need to ask a favor. If you enjoy this podcast, would you please take a moment and go to iTunes and leave me a rating? This will help spread the word and bring the show to more listeners. I am honored and delighted that you are listening to my podcast. If you find value from the show and want to help me keep the lights on, I've launched a Patreon page. Patreon is an online service that allows people to support creators in their work. You can find mine at patreon.com/Mark J. Connor. Now on to the episode. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So, Andrew, you're a composer and conductor at the University of New Hampshire. Could you tell everybody about your background, what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I've been out at UNH for 20 years now. My job here is director of bands. So primarily I'm doing conducting stuff. I teach undergraduate conducting sequence, and I conduct the Wind Symphony here, which is our top band on campus. But I'm also in charge of the graduate program. So, I'm doing graduate conducting lessons and things like that. And then, a couple of composition students a semester usually. But my job during the day is actually pretty much focused on conducting.
How did you get started in music? What was it? What was your early musical experience like?
So I grew up in Iowa, which is, one of a number of states that have just a strong, band traditions, music traditions. And I grew up in a family that appreciated music, and like my grandmother was a music teacher, a piano and voice teacher, and my dad's sister was a music major in college, and so music was definitely important in our household. So I started taking piano lessons when I was relatively young. Started writing music kind of as just part of what I was doing in piano lessons, and kind of fell in love with that. And then I fifth grade band, just like all sorts of people around the country. Kind of unusually, I guess, started on French horn in fifth grade, which is not necessarily a normal path. So I was a horn player, and we had really strong programs where I grew up. So I was lucky to be part of something with great teachers. I had my high school band director was actually my private lesson teacher at first in fifth grade. We had pull-out lessons and that sort of thing. And my middle school band teacher was one of those folks who would take groups of kids down to university faculty recitals and things like that. So I was exposed to some different things pretty early on, and just great teaching, and then that helped support me all the way through. I went to University of Iowa right down the road from where I grew up. So I grew up in Cedar Rapids, which is 30 minutes from the University of Iowa, and did a music ed degree there with, instead of performance as my secondary kind of area, it was composition. So I was able to kind of keep studying composition and do that sort of thing all the way through undergrad, even though I was doing music ed. Went right on and did my master's degree actually at Northwestern in conducting with Mr. Painter, and Steve Peterson was there at the time. Taught high school for a couple of years in the Chicago suburbs, and then was able to move on to Indiana State for a year as the marching band director, and then my doctorate at Eastman with Mr. Hunsberger. And then I've been here at UNH for the last 20 years.
So tell me about the high school. Where were you in Chicago?
Northwest suburbs. The high school was Cary Grove, which is kind of, it's a ways out of the city. And it was a really growing area at the time, and a band program with just a wonderful history. I replaced a gentleman who was just beloved in the community and just a super musician, and the band was big and the kids were excited about it. And that way it was kind of, I probably wasn't ready for it, as a young teacher, to kind of walk into something that was already really quite good. But I was lucky because I was able to step into something and kind of try to push it forward and keep things moving. And I had some great kids. I mean, I was only there 2 years, but one of the freshman percussionists in my first year of teaching was in Cormac Cannon. I don't know if you know that name, but Cormac's the associate director of bands at South Carolina now. So he does the marching band down there. Works with Scott Weiss, and he's a composer. I think he might be in the 4th volume of Composers on Composing for Band. Just a wonderfully talented guy, and so I was pretty lucky there again to have such great kids in some of my first teaching position. So
sure. So how did you manage that, taking over a program from a as you said, a legendary conductor? And
I think I must have talked to some of the folks at Northwestern about it, because I think I went in and did mostly the right things, and where I stumbled was, and I learned from, was that especially with a program like that, you can't change anything at first, and I mostly did that. I mostly went in and said, this is how you did it in the past, this is how we're going to keep doing it, because those kind of transitions, especially where the kids, for lack of a better word, they worship the teacher that they've had. That's a hard transition for a high school kid to make. They're going into their senior year of high school or something, and now somebody new comes in. And I tell our kids here, like, for the most part, don't change anything, or change as little as you can. I mean, it's going to be different no matter what, because you're you. So if you start changing everything right up front, it looks like you don't have any respect for what's happened before. So I think I did pretty well with that. And there were some things where I just really I didn't know how to do it the way he was doing it. So I had to kind of do it my way. And so that was plenty of change right there. Like marching band thing. I mean, he was doing squad drills because he'd been teaching a long time. And I had no experience with that whatsoever. So, first year teaching, it was like, and now we're going to learn to read drill charts together. So for the most part, I think it was a pretty smooth transition.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you did a great job. I think that's a common problem. Any teacher who starts new, it's very uncommon to start a program or to walk into a situation where it's in such bad shape that no matter what you do, you can't fail.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. That I was walking into a successful program, but even if it's a program that's just kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, average. There's still going to be a sense of, this is for the kids. This is our program. This is how we do it here at our school, and you don't want to destroy that, because that energy is super important to actually creating a good rehearsal atmosphere, a good musical atmosphere, a desire to succeed. So those things are important.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the composing. And so you said that you were composing at a young age at your piano lessons, and then you did the double degree at Iowa. When did you start writing works for band, or has that always been something that you did?
Yeah, I did that pretty early on. Like when I was, I don't know, 4th grade or whatever, is when I started kind of writing little piano pieces. And, the first one was just kind of this page at the end of the piano book, just like, hey, now write your own piece. And I think at the time I only knew the black keys on the piano, so my little piece went up to the top of the keyboard and back down, and I called it the elevator or something, But I had one of those piano teachers who was really supportive, and she's, this is such a great, neat thing. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. And then I don't know how long it was, but a while later, it was my mom's birthday, and I was, again, 10 years old or whatever, and I don't have money to get mom a present, so I wrote her a little piece. And moms and dads, this is great. So I kind of just started slowly doing this more, and I started to enjoy it. And so then I started band in 5th grade, and by 7th grade I was kind of like I wrote a little brass piece for my friends, and we played in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade or 9th grade I did another piece for like even more friends, and I think that was kind of like, it was one of those, 2 alto saxes, a percussionist, 3 horns, a flute player, and it was like the weirdest instrumentation ever, but it was for my friends, and we played it, I don't know, on some, like before some concert somewhere, but that was a cool experience. So I was actually, even in 9th grade, I wrote a band piece. We didn't play that, but I was kind of experimenting with that. And then high school was 10, 11, 12, and each year I wrote a piece, and our band director, we would play it at the commencement concert. The band would play a little concert as everybody's coming in for commencement. So it wasn't like high pressure. A lot of people are talking out in the hall, but I got performances of my music every year in high school, and I can't thank my band director, my high school band director, enough for that.
Yeah, that's terrific.
That kind of support is actually, I think sometimes band directors worry about like trying to help a young composer, and then like maybe they don't know how to help them be a better composer. The single greatest thing composers need, and I think you would probably agree, is they need opportunity. They need to be able to write something, hear it, and go, oh, that's not what I thought that was going to sound like, and they learn. Or like, wow, that was really cool. I'm going to remember to do that again. That's the single greatest way we learn, I think, is to actually finish a piece and have it performed.
Absolutely, no question of that. And MIDI is not a substitute for that.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, absolutely not. I don't. All of my students use that. I don't. But I still do pencil and paper, and I don't push that at all on my students. I actually think they're so capable and they're so fast with it that it certainly works really well for them to do it that way. But that's just not my method. And so I'm a pencil and paper guy. It's one of those things. When Finale first came out back in the mid '90s, I was teaching high school. And I decided that I was you remember this days, so you'd finish a piece and then you'd hand copy out all the parts. So I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy this program Finale. I'm teaching high school, and I remember writing this piece, and it was called Scherzos for Matt George at the University of St. Thomas. And it was music all time too. So it was kind of, teach all day, and then if you'd have musical rehearsal from 4 to 10, and then I'm coming home and trying to input this piece because it's due for Matt, so then I stay up till 2 and then get up and do the whole thing the next day again. And I just remember sitting down to start plugging it in, and back in those days, Finale, you'd get 3 volumes or 4 volumes, and they're each like 500 pages long of manuals. So like, okay, clarinet 1 has a G quarter note on B1. Okay, page 243, inputs C volume 3, page 620. Okay, C volume 2, so like, 7 minutes later, I put my first note in. And it was death, and the thing just looked horrible. I wonder Matt could even play it. And I kind of decided in that moment, this is not. I'd rather write 2 more pieces and pay somebody else to do this than try to figure this out and have to keep up on it, because it's constantly changing. And I've been blessed. I've had the same copyist for about 20 years now. He has a doctorate in composition from Rutgers, studied with Charles Wernan, got his own publishing company. His name's Craig Levesque. He's a fantastic composer and musician, and he knows my manuscript, and he'll email me and like, Andy, I see you're using the pitch set, and so you sure this shouldn't be F sharp here, not F? Like, yeah, Craig, you're right.
Oh, that's awesome.
He fixes my mistakes. Yeah, so it's a great partnership. So.
Can I link his publishing company? What's his publishing company?
Sure, absolutely. The publishing company is Art of Sound Music. They've become really big in the brass world, actually.
Oh, okay.
A lot of chamber music for brass, and they've got a lot of really big name composers attached to them that way. They have a few band pieces in the catalog too, but they're really becoming quite successful on the brass thing, and yeah, I'd highly recommend them. It's a great company.
Oh, great. That's great. I'll definitely link that in the show notes. It's interesting, that you use a copyist and that you farm that out. Do you do any notation software at all?
Nope. Nope. I think I have it on my school computer in case I need to like do a quick, something for a student or whatever. But like, I don't even know the last time I opened Sibelius or Finale.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it's a conscious choice, and to not use your time in that way. And boy, it would be nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a conscious choice, and I'm lucky enough to be in the position where I can do that, which is why I recommend to my students, like, learn it. Just use it. It's a great tool for you.
Right. Okay. So let's connect the dots from high school. So then you did your doctorate at Eastman.
Yes. And
so did you go from Eastman to Indiana State and then to New Hampshire?
No. Okay. So Iowa undergrad, right into a master's, which was unusual. And everybody told me I shouldn't at the time, but I did it anyway. And then from there, a couple of years of high school teaching, and then Indiana State for a year, and then Eastman.
Oh, I see. So how did you get that Indiana State job?
Yeah, so Eastman was from a master's, like teaching high school. And yeah. Okay, so the guy the story at Indiana State at the time was the marching band director, the associate director of bands there was Doug Kaiser. He's still on the music ed faculty there, and he's a great friend. He actually was, for the year, taking over as the department chair. So he just needed somebody to replace him for a year, and he was actually going to be around So which was awesome because he helped me out a ton. But Doug was a master's student at Iowa when I was an undergrad. So I got to know Doug really well because I was, doing a lot of writing and things like that. And I was on the band staff and stuff like that, working. So you do stuff with the grad students. So I knew Doug since I was an undergrad. So I think that's really it was one of those kind of late summer, he realized he needed to be the department chair because there's nobody else to do it. So, I was able to kind of catch a break essentially. And Doug thought of me, and I went down and did a quick interview with him and John Boyd, and I was able to do that job, which was, I think, really important for me because it gave me some of that experience that I needed to be able to really prepare for a program like Eastman. So,
what was your program like at Cary Grove? Did you have a successful program that sort of attracted the eye, other than your connection in graduate school? What were you doing in high school that were you thinking about a doctorate?
I was one of those. So here's the kind of the long story on that, if you want to know it or not. But
sure.
I'm a fairly shy person in a lot of ways. And, like when I was in high school, if the director wasn't going to be there, and they'll often have like somebody else kind of take over rehearsal. One of the kids will just run through something or whatever, where they have to take care of something. My band director wouldn't ask me to do that because I think he probably wasn't confident I'd be okay, So I kind of went into my undergrad wanting to be a composition teacher. I was not going to do music ed because I wasn't sure that would be something I'd be super successful at. And it was about late in my sophomore year, I kind of just looked around the comp seminar and I realized like that really wasn't me, that actually I wanted to be hanging out with the band folks. And so that's when I kind of made the decision to kind of do this music ed thing with the comp alongside it. And luckily the Iowa folks were willing to kind of help out with that. So, I went right on to grad school. I was like, what I love is band music. So I wanted to work at the highest level I could.
Oh, okay. So you kind of had an idea already.
So I was kind of like, I wanted to do college eventually. Yeah. And I wouldn't necessarily have left Cary Grove. It's just that opportunity came along and it was like, well, this could be what could take me there. Because actually there were a lot of things I liked about teaching high school. And it was a program that was developing. It was a really good program. He was doing great things, but when I walked into the first year, it was 160, I think it was about 160 kids, but it was in one band.
Yeah.
So concert band was 160 kids in one room. So that was the first year, and that's how he had done it and successfully. But there was certainly you were able to split it, and I think immediately you get those top kids out, and they can start pushing their own skills a little bit, and it enabled me to kind of work at the appropriate level for some of the younger folks, or the ones that weren't as serious about it. So I think it was going to continue to grow, and it did for a while. I actually haven't talked to Marty in a while, the guy that's there now, so I don't know how the program's doing. I hope it's doing great, but so the guy that ended up taking over for me, another great guy, and I think everything is great there. But yeah, it was a program that was in good shape and developing, but it wasn't like I was doing something so spectacular there that's why I got the job at Indiana State.
Oh, I see. How did you sell that splitting the bands to the kids?
Well, it actually was pretty easy because you just get an administrator in the room and see. I mean, the baritone saxophone players were like in row 9 or whatever, like in the back corner of the room behind the lockers, like having that many kids in one room is just, especially the size of room we had, was not reasonable. So it actually turned out to be a fairly easy sell job, I guess, say it that way.
So the kids bought in?
The kids mostly were good. In the first year, I was pretty, I think, sensitive to the fact that, like, this kid's a senior, they probably shouldn't be in the top group, but
yeah, sure.
Okay, for the first year. So the first year, there were maybe a few more flutes that should have been in there, but that's, again, I mean, my first year of teaching, it was pretty crazy to sit there, stand up in front of the concert band, and I look over to my left, and there were literally like 41 clarinets.
I'm sure there's someone listening with like 4 clarinets that would gladly take that.
I know. It was crazy though. To like, I have no idea in the back row if they played a note or not, because there weren't pull-out lessons. And so, there were a lot of things that with the years of experience that I have now, if I went back, I would do things differently for sure.
Yeah, intonation must be a huge problem with that many students.
I don't think we worried about it too much the first year.
It was just loud.
Yeah, well, it was that. Yeah, but you know what? With the top group, we started. There were some nice things the second year, but
I'm
I
sure.
I can't complain to. I can't claim to be, you know, I've taught far longer at the university level than I ever taught in the public schools. But
Sure. So let's talk about that. What's the program look like at the University of New Hampshire?
well, it's the university is about 15,000. So it's a kind of medium-sized place, and I'd say we're kind of a medium-sized school of music or department of music. We're between 150, 200 majors usually. We have three concert bands, and a couple of jazz bands, marching bands, pretty active chamber music program. So a lot of good things here. My group has been very consistent for a long time, and it's primarily undergrads. Basically, the only graduate students that are playing in my group are conducting grad students that happen to want to also play. So it's a very music ed oriented department. I'm pretty proud of what we do, both in terms of like the playing level of the group and in the kind of teachers we turn out. I feel like we do a great job of preparing our folks and giving them good experiences. So, and I've been lucky; we've been able to do a bunch of recording things. We've been able to play and tour. Well, not really tour, but play at conventions and things occasionally. And we've been able to bring in a lot of wonderful guest composers and conductors. So it's been a nice place. I'm very happy here.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And ironically enough, you're the second college band director that I've interviewed from the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, I think I saw that you
Mark Stickney
interviewed Mark a while ago. Yeah, Mark's great, and he's that some of the things I don't know if he talked much about some of the NEBDI program that he runs up there.
Yes,
it's a really wonderful place for the teachers in our state.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Gary Corcoran started it, and Mark's just made it even better. And yeah, he's doing great things for the teachers in the state.
Yeah, he was.
We're lucky. We have I have some good colleagues in the state. Jim Cheesebro over at Keene State, and Rick Cook at Southern New Hampshire University, and Mark up at Plymouth State. Just great folks.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've only interviewed one person from Texas so far, Carol Britton Chambers, and two from New Hampshire.
Who would have guessed, right? What are the chances of that in the band world?
We'll check back after 100 episodes, but
yeah, I was gonna say you're gonna probably get it. That's gonna change here eventually, but
sure.
Go New Hampshire.
So you mentioned that you bring lots of guest composers in. So do you have any experiences to share, anecdotes to share?
Yeah, well, we've done a few recordings over the years. We've done Tim Marr and Mark Camphouse, David Mislanka, Dan Buckbitch, and then we did one of our faculty composers who's written a lot for bands. His music's not really widely known, but his name is Michael Anacarico. So we've done several recordings featuring only a specific composer, and so we've had those folks on campus for extended period of time. So that's always really, really fun. Any stories? So Tim Marr, I've known since I was an undergrad. He was a doctoral student at Iowa when I was a freshman, and so he's been a friend for a very long time. And we just had him out again this spring. We were one of the commissioning groups for his Symphony No. 1. Tim Marr's finally written a symphony. I don't know if you know that or not. And it's a really cool piece. We were kind of it was like my third year here or something. So the program was still kind of developing, and we did a disc of Tim's stuff. And it was funny, the kids started calling it the Marathon. Because we were doing really long recording sessions in Tim Marr, and then they called it the Marathon. So, but he was great to work with. And Dan is a big friend of our program. I also run our summer youth music school. So my wife and I and the marching band director Casey Goodwin all kind of coordinate our music camp. And Dan comes out and teaches at that every year. So we have Dan Buckbitch on campus during the summer every year, and so he's a great friend. And I wish his music was more widely known. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of amazing stuff that's so different from everything else that's out.
Do you have one piece of his that you like more than others that I can link for people to listen to?
Oh gosh, there's just no. I love his music in general. I teach the Symphony No. 1 all the time because that's really kind of standard repertoire for high school. So I teach it with my conducting students all the time. I was lucky enough to conduct the premiere of his symphonic movement with the Idaho All-State Band a couple years ago. Really great piece. There's all this stuff where kids moving out into the hall, some really cool percussion instruments that he's created himself for the piece. The stuff that we did when we did the recording is so widely varying. If you put on one and then another piece, you wouldn't know it was the same composer.
Yeah.
Some really cool jazz influence things, some stuff with like great aleatoric things that kind of like spin out over huge amounts of time. And then there's things like Buffalo Jump Ritual, which I think is becoming fairly standard lit now, which is a great tribute to John Barnes Chance and Macbeth and some of those composers. So that's a really cool piece. Yeah, he's just really inventive. I can't recommend him highly enough.
Oh, yeah. Sure, absolutely. You've been conducting for 20 years. What hard-earned lessons, hard-earned advice would you pass along to young conductors, young band directors?
It's
a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question, and I actually have lots of opinions about it, but I think we all probably do, And maybe in some ways they're the things that we all hear every time we go anywhere from anyone, and we all have to kind of just learn it on our own, maybe.
Well, that's advice right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Some of this stuff we just have to learn on our own. You hear lots of young teachers who kind of like, they never taught me this in undergrad. Well, you can't teach everything. Some of this is just, you have to experience it to know and to understand it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I was just talking to someone, and we were talking about being a young band director, and for the most part, for the first time, this is when a young band director, when they first get their first job, is when they actually get to flex their musical muscle and be the boss for the first time, or like be the big, in charge. And so there's a big learning curve because you're dealing with that emotion.
Yep, absolutely.
And so a lot of these things are learned in the first couple of years at such a rapid pace. I look back, I made the mistake of listening to my band from my second year of teaching.
Yeah.
And I listened to the judges' comments.
Yeah.
It's so humiliating to listen back 25 years ago and go, wow, I really didn't think about doing that. But it's a learning curve.
No, I was just going to say it was probably stuff that was talked about in your curriculum, but like until you have to do it, it doesn't take real meaning until it's like your responsibility.
And it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
The amount of detail.
And that's one of the things. I mean, this is not necessarily a conducting thing. This is maybe a teaching thing. I think it's scary that the teacher burnout rate across the board, but certainly for music teachers. And I've seen a lot of really great teachers that could be really great that get so frazzled, flustered by the first couple years that they give up before they can really become great. And that's hard to see, like the really great ones that get kind of beaten down before they have a chance to. So kind of just surviving at first, I think, is really important.
Yeah, for sure. How can we help them?
Boy, I think there are a lot of, I think there are way more resources out there now. A lot of states have, I remember in Iowa, they have a mentor program where they, their young teachers are basically like assigned if you're part of the Iowa Bandmasters Association, I think you're like assigned a mentor you can check in with and get help from. Because in a place like Iowa, you could be in a small town where the next town is, 45 minutes away. It's not like you're going to talk to anybody else in your building because you're the only music teacher for the town. And that happens here in New Hampshire too. So it can be really lonely. I think having somebody else to even just talk to about stuff is really important. But that kind of falls on the young teacher to actually say, I need that. And that's where I think that probably the disconnect is. And I think the resources are out there, but just being willing to say, I need help, or to just be willing to say, I need to have somebody else to just talk to about what happened in rehearsal today. Because the English teacher is not going to get what happened in rehearsal today. Those are different problems.
Of course.
So,
do you make calls to your graduates?
I don't make necessarily calls, but I try to check in with them. I try to be available anytime they want me to come out, and I'm definitely out and helping. And I try to let them know that like that doesn't end when they graduate from here. If that relationship should be there, and I think that's true around the country. I think that the University of Music Ed folks and band folks and choir folks, like they want to see their folks succeed. So they're willing to help out well after.
It's hard. I like I mentioned earlier, when you're a first year teacher, you're in the beginning. In some ways, you're very self-conscious about your program. It's hard to invite people in.
Yes, I agree. And yet that's the time that you should probably do it.
Of course. I
was actually really impressed. Like it's very interesting this year. I got a commission from a high school band out in Oregon, and this gentleman's name is Andrew Desmond. He's at Lake Oswego High School out in Oregon, and I realized he commissioned me his first year of teaching.
Oh wow!
That I've never had happen before. I mean, that's the kind of thing, like the willingness to, like, he had to put himself out there a lot to commission a composer and bring that composer in to put his band in front of, hey, we're going to play this in my second year of teaching. Do this premiere,
Yeah. How did he find you?
She's an Ohio State grad, and I'm, really good friends with some of the folks that have been there. Scott Jones, I think, was a really formative influence on Andrew, and Scott had mentioned me at some point, so he kind of just went with the recommendation there.
So this is a big question, but what do you think the challenges are facing the band and music education community in the next couple of years?
I think there are a lot of challenges facing
our art. What challenges are facing our art?
Facing classical music, facing art music in general. But I think that all filters down. Like, the whole STEM push is I think a big threat. I think there's a lack of appreciation for what art does for us as a society, as a culture, and that lack of appreciation means that there's a much higher willingness to let go of those sorts of things. And the students, our students are, I think, taught how to go and advocate for their programs, but I think they're going to probably have to more and more. And even within that, there was a big CBDNA push, a few years ago. Like, how's the band going to survive? Basically, should we really be trying to model ourselves on the orchestra when orchestras are dying? And that's a hard question, And the band music world is so insular in a way. Like, a lot of the people that write about band history are band conductors. You don't see musicologists writing about band history. We don't spread very far in a lot of ways. So that's a hard thing for us, I think. And then there's been a recent push to de-emphasize large ensembles.
Mm-hmm.
There are other ways to do music education, which is true. But as somebody whose best musical moments were in an ensemble, not sitting in class where somebody played a recording for me, that's where I learned to love music. You learn to love it by living it, not reading about it.
I love chamber music. I love chamber music. I just heard the Brahms B major piano trio last night. It's an incredible piece of music, but
Right.
There's nothing like a work for full band or for full orchestra or a fully staged opera.
Right.
There's nothing. It's the pinnacle, that large ensemble.
Right. And I would hate to see that disappear, but it's probably going to take even more advocacy.
Mm-hmm. This is across the board, I think, though.
Yeah. And I'm not, I'm a person who's probably gets sucked into, just like a lot of people, like the things I need to do to make my program still run and to fulfill my commissions and the things I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those few people that are really leading and have that bigger vision are super important.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at that myself. So, well, my wife, when she was teaching high school, she was like on the state boards for both the Massachusetts Music Educators Association and the Conductors Association in the state. So she's the kind of person that's like out there advocating for that sort of thing. And so I've seen the kind of work she does and how important that is. So I think it's going to continue to be super important.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned commissions in your last in the last answer. What's it like, or how would a composer commission you? What does that look like for you?
It's become now these days almost, I'm sure probably it's true for you as well. All this stuff happens over email. Somebody will just write and say, I'm interested. Is this a possibility? That sort of thing. And for me, it basically comes down to two things: the timing and the money. Really, I love it when somebody asks me to write for them. I want to write for you. So if I can fit it in, I will. And if we can make the commission fee work for your budget and for mine, then that's really the two biggest questions. Because I don't mind, if somebody coming to me and saying, hey, I need a piece that does these things, I don't mind that. So I'm not one of those people that kind of picks and chooses commissions a little bit, at least not generally speaking. I usually take those kinds of, like when you have a really specific commission, like for an event or that sort of thing, that's kind of a challenge. Like, how can I fulfill what you need and fulfill what I need as a composer too?
Right. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I assume we're talking professionally here, not personally.
Well, it could be personal. I've had people say that I would make sure that I was more healthy or I didn't do this.
Yeah,
so it could be.
I probably should have done that. I probably should have done that. I probably should have given up eating like 16 candy bars a week earlier in my life. The professional end of things, I think I've even though my path has been, windy like everybody else's, I think that's part of the journey. So I don't necessarily regret any of that. I maybe should have had more confidence in my abilities to, I told you I was like a shy person. I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to stand in front of kids like that. I should have had more confidence in my ability to do that. But I don't. That's, again, it's part of my path, I think. It's allowed me to learn. What's been great for me because of that is I can look around and there's not one way to be a great teacher. And that's a nice thing to know. It took me a long time to learn that, because you think about a lot of students, young students, model themselves after their teachers. They want to be like their teachers were, and then they try to be somebody that they're not. And you got to learn to not be. You need to learn to be yourself. One of the best middle school teachers in our state is, you think of middle school band directors as being super gregarious and funny, and there's a lot of really great ones that are that way. But there's a great middle school band teacher in our state who's the opposite of that. He's very kind. He's very calm. He's very organized, and the kids love him. So there's no one way to be a great teacher.
Yeah, I think it's the kids love the genuine person.
Yep.
They can smell when you're not being genuine with them, can't they?
Absolutely. And if I'd have realized that sooner, that might have been better for me. So.
Yeah, it's tricky. Well, you want to try to be larger than life when you first start.
Yes.
Those first couple years, we've been back to that a few times. They're hard.
Yeah, they are. They definitely are.
Yeah.
And it gets easier very quickly, but that's the start is tough for sure.
So, Andrew, what's your favorite work for wind ensemble or band, and why? Absolutely,
without a doubt, David Mislanka Symphony No. 4. And I think it's just his best piece, just in terms of the cohesiveness of it all. The message of it all is it's direct, it's heart-wrenching, and yet it's so nicely organized. The architecture of it's just beautifully done. It's just a powerful piece. From the first time I heard it, and I've done it many times, and every time I look at the score, I find something new in it. It's just a great piece.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece. Now, how about your own work? What if someone asked, what piece of yours should I listen to know Andrew Boysen, the composer? Where would you stare them?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a harder question in a way, right? To ask the composer. You'd probably agree on this.
Oh yeah, it's hard.
Other people don't seem to have a hard time picking out which one is our best piece, but to us, they're kind of all our children. So maybe we kind of love them warts and all a little bit. You know what I mean?
Right. And I would give my answer based on who was asking, but I'm asking you generically.
Yeah. I think I'm really proud of I've written a bunch of symphonies now, some bigger than others, but my Symphony No. 6, just I think start to finish, and again, question of architecture and organization, I think it was really well done. At least I'm proud of it. But I think service level too, like just your mom and dad that comes to listen to the concert. I think I'm really proud of how that is perceived. I'm probably proudest of that piece right now.
Oh, great. So is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Oh, no, not necessarily. I don't know. I wasn't really thinking about that one.
Any commissions coming up?
Yeah, I've got a big list of commissions to be working on. I'm working on actually another symphony for a former student of mine. He said, I want to organize a consortium of some of your former students to kind of thank you. So I'm writing a piece for them. So that's kind of cool to have a bunch of
that's awesome.
Students out there that are kind of asking me to write a piece for them. So I'm doing that right now. And I mentioned Scott Jones earlier. He has a really wonderful group at Ohio State that just this last year they recorded a disc of my music. So that's going to be coming out soon. So I'm really excited about that because I've heard some of the takes on that, and it's really fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff happening. So
and how about with anything good on the program with the bands at New Hampshire coming up?
Yeah. Oh, I'm always excited every year. Our guest conductor this year for our Women Invitational is going to be Travis Cross. So we're going to have him out and get him to work with some of the schools in the area and do some of his music. Got our new faculty piano soloist is going to do Rhapsody in Blue with us this fall, and got some grad students conducting some cool things. Like Static Waters, Stephen Bryant. One of them is going to do New Morning for the World, the new transcription that Nick Pilato did. So yeah, it's going to be a fun year. I'm already excited about it.
Oh, it sounds great. Yeah, I'd like to get Travis Cross on the show.
Yeah, you should. He's a super nice guy.
Yeah, I'll have to reach out.
He's great with the kids. Yeah, absolutely.
I was at the UNCG, the North Carolina Greensboro band camps yesterday, and I was watching one of the junior high rehearsals, and the fellow sitting next to me was a high school teacher who's leaving his job to go be a doctoral student with Travis.
Oh, out at UCLA.
Yeah, I was like, wow, congratulations. Good. That's awesome.
He will have a great time.
I'm sure
You'll
he
have
will.
a great time out there. Travis is a great man. He's, I think, from what I can tell, doing some really good things there.
For sure. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm happy to help out in any way I can with anybody. It's pretty easy to find me, because college teachers, just Google and it'll pop up. But it's just andrew.boysen@unh.edu.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, no. This is thank you for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be part of this. I think you're doing a really great thing here.
Oh, I appreciate
creating a resource for people. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you spending a few minutes.
absolutely. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm sure we will cross paths again sometime soon.
Oh, I'm sure we will.